My name is Jackie Francis. I'm the Dean of Humanities and Sciences here at CCA, and I'm the co-convener of this event with Mary Oken of the Living New Deal. So thank you all for being here. We're so honored to have these panelists for the penultimate programming moment of our 3-day convening. It's a panel whose title is Intangible, Legacies of Public Art, featuring Deborah Cullinan of Stanford as our moderator, Susan Cervantes, artist and Precita Eyes director, Gilda Posada, scholar and artist, and of course, Rhodessa Jones, artist, performer, writer, many things. In brief, I want to introduce Deborah Cullinan, who will introduce the other panelists. Since 2022, Deborah Cullinan has been Vice President for the Arts at Stanford University, where she represents the arts on that campus at the highest levels of the administration. She oversees the Anderson Collection, the Cantor Arts Center, the Institute for Diversity in the Arts, the Stanford Arts Institute, and Stanford Live. Before joining the Stanford leadership team, Deborah Cullinan was the Chief Executive Officer of the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco. During her tenure at YBCA, she launched several bold programs, engagement strategies, and civic coalitions, including the YBCA 100, the Artist Power Center, and a guaranteed income pilot program for artists in partnership with the city of San Francisco. Throughout her career, she has been committed to revolutionizing the role that art plays in public life, which is central. She is a co-founder of Culture Bank, was a co-chair of the San Francisco Arts Alliance, and secretary of the Community Arts Stabilization Trust Board. She served on San Francisco Mayor London Breeze, San Francisco Economic Recovery Task Force, and governed Gavin Newsom's Jobs and Business Recovery Task Force. She is a graduate of Lawrence University, where she earned her bachelor's degrees in history and anthropology. So please welcome Deborah Cullinan.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Who loves a bio? Like, who loves listening to their own bio? We're going to have fun. I know you all have had a really extraordinary couple of days, and it's like an absolute thing for me because there are so many legends in this room. So I'm honored to be here. So I'm going to share the bios of our esteemed panelists, and then we'll get into a conversation. So I'm going to start with Susan Cervantes. Susan is an American artist. She is a leading member of the San Francisco mural movement and the co-founder and executive director of the community-based nonprofit Precita Eyes Muralists. Cervantes is a leader in the Mission District community mural movement and is herself a community artist responsible for over 400 murals. I'm just going to leave that for a second. Susan was introduced to murals through Diego Rivera's The Making of a Fresco showing the building of a city at Diego Rivera Gallery, and was inspired by and then joined the Mujeres Muralistas in the early 1970s. She was asked to help paint with the Mujeres Muralistas at Paco's Tacos, a restaurant on the corner of 24th and South Van Ness, which marks the moment she lost interest in her studio practice and her work on canvas. Though Cervantes was not Chicana, and probably still isn't, her work was strongly influenced by and sensitive to the Chicano art movement. Maestropiece is a monumental mural, many of you I'm sure know, created by Susan and 6 other artists with the help of over 100 volunteers that depicts vibrant and powerful images of women from various cultures and historical periods, highlighting their strength, resilience, and contributions to society, something beautiful to think about on International Women's Day. Located on the Women's Building in San Francisco, the mural serves as a hub for various organizations and programs that promote women's rights, social justice, and cultural diversity. For her part, Susan drew inspiration from artists with various backgrounds, such as Diego Rivera, Dewey Crumpler, and the Las Mujeres Muralistas. Precita Eyes has participated in many of the murals that are in San Francisco's historic Mission District neighborhood, known for murals that cover the walls of many buildings. They collaborate with schools in the community, as well as other youth programs, to allow youth artists to plan and execute their own mural designs at their school or local building. Precita Eyes partners with mural artists to teach technique and creative thinking to students. making sure that they have guidance, but also the freedom to create something that is meaningful to them and to their community. Also among their slew of programs is a toddler art class, support for young artists through exhibitions of their work, and providing educational tours of the murals in the neighborhood. Please welcome Susan Cervantes. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Gilda Posada. Gilda is a Chicana artist, independent curator, and art historian from Southeast Los Angeles. Her work explores Chicano, indigenous, feminist, and queer decolonial practices through art and visual culture. Gilda received her BA from UC Davis in Chicano Studies and Comparative Literature. She graduated with a dual degree from CCA in the MFA Social Practice programs and the MA Visual and Critical Studies program. Prior to her graduate work, she served as the curator for Galleria de la Raza in San Francisco and assistant director for Taller Arte del Nueve, a monastery in Woodland, California. Gilda is a continuing lecturer in Chicano studies at UC Davis and is currently a PhD candidate in history of art at Cornell University, where she is completing her dissertation, Reigniting the Sacred Fire, an analysis of Chicana, indigenous, and queer Chicano art that articulates how Chicano artists have used materiality and visual culture as a method to reconnect to their indigenous knowledges, ceremonies, medicines, and creation stories. Welcome, Gilda. And last but definitely not least is Rhodessa Jones. Rhodessa Jones is co-artistic director of the San Francisco acclaimed performance company Cultural Odyssey. She is an actress, a teacher, singer, and writer. She is also the director of the award-winning Medea Project, Theater for Incarcerated Women, which is a performance workshop that is designed to achieve personal and social transformation with incarcerated women and women living with HIV. In 2015, Rhodessa Jones received the Theater Practitioner Award presented by Theater Communications Group. The award recognizes a living individual whose work in the American theater has evidenced exemplary achievement over time and who has contributed significantly to the development of the larger field. In 2016, she received a Theater Bay Area Legacy Award presented to individuals that have made extraordinary contributions to the Bay Area theater community. In 2017, Rhodessa was named a Montgomery Fellow at Dartmouth University. Additionally, in 2017, she was also selected as Frank H.T. Rhodes' Class of 1956 Visiting Professor at Cornell University. Rhodessa has received many awards for her work, including a Sui Generis Foundation Award in 2014, a Goldie Lifetime Achievement Award presented by the San Francisco Bay Guardian in 2003, an Otto Rene Castillo Award for Political Theater in 2002, and a San Francisco Foundation Community Leadership Award, commending her for developing the Medea Project as an intersection of art, politics, and social rehabilitation. Rhodessa was honored with an honorary doctorate from California College for the Arts in 2004, and we are so glad to have her back here on this campus. Please welcome Rhodessa. So, I think this panel, as I understand it, as we culminate what seems to have been a pretty extraordinary couple of days, is really about two things in my mind. And the first is about memory, both the tangible and intangible memories of the impact that these kinds of programs have had. And for me, it's also about momentum. It's about building on this work and really understanding what it was and what it can be today and tomorrow. And I just want to say a couple words personally about how meaningful it is for me to be sitting with these extraordinary human beings and to be in the presence of so many people I consider to be legends. And that is that all of my work has been fueled by what I learned from this kind of work. When I first stepped into the arts as a very young executive director at Intersection for the Arts, it was everything to me to understand how it came into being, what it meant to people, and what it could be in the new moment that we were in then. I moved on to Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, where Jackie mentioned, we did things like guaranteed basic income for artists. We worked with the San Francisco Planning Department on a very robust couple-of-year project related to Market Street. And while I was serving on Governor Newsom's task force during COVID, I was able to capture his attention and really help him understand what the WPA had been, what CETA had been, and that led to the creation of the California Creative Corps. So I'm really proud of that, and it is only because of all of you that I was able to take myself off mute and try to get in there and tell a little story about the history of these programs. I'm now at Stanford University, where I'm the first full-time vice president for the arts. That means I'm dedicated full-time. I report to the president, and I get to think about how you really integrate this stuff everywhere. And we are right now in partnership with the Mellon Foundation launching a United States Cultural Policy Fellows program that is no doubt inspired by, fueled by, taken from all the work that all of you are doing. I'll say one last thing and move on to the more important people here. We were originally going to be deploying through the Intergovernmental Personnel Act artists and cultural strategists into federal government. We're not doing that right now, but we are going to be working with the state of California through the California Arts Council. And a big part of this work will be to try to build a repository and a network that connects all of this history. You know, Virginia, all of you who've been doing so much work, one of the things that we have to get even better at is putting it all somewhere and making it really identifiable. So I'm hoping that we can all do that together. So again, thank you for your inspiration and for all that all of you have done to help me in my career. So we're going to start with just a kind of broad question, which is really just similar to the last panel. What is your relationship to the New Deal and to CETA? And maybe if you can just kind of flesh out what are the intangible things that you think that you have in terms of that relationship? And maybe we could start with you, Susan.
Well, the WPA, to me, I go back to like the Diego Riveras and, people that were influenced by him. Doing murals and kind of like our lineage as muralists, and I was looking at, we went to see Dewey's work at Washington High and the Sergeant Johnson, which was done during the WPA and all of that. So there's a lineage that I feel very strongly with. But as I got into CETA, which I didn't really connect it at that time until this learning as I went along that this was like similar to that, where they're hiring artists, employing artists to do community work in public places. And I really felt that, I wasn't looking for a job. It happened to be that my husband was on strike at work for the first time in a long, long time. For the furniture workers were on strike. So we didn't have any income. And I had, we just moved to Precita Park. I had my first son who was just only about a year old. And I was looking around for what was there for children and youth to do in the, in the area. And there wasn't any arts programs. There wasn't any anything in the schools. There wasn't anything at the community center. Nothing that was visible. The park was all dilapidated play equipment. So I felt that I needed to share at that time. And I was working with the Muralistas working with them on a mural. Then they involved me in that process of collaboration, which I thought was really fantastic and unique. And I wanted to bring that to our community at Precita Valley Community Center, where I was volunteering my time doing toddlers classes, preschool classes, kids art classes, and doing painting classes at night, because my passion is painting, and I knew as an artist that I could share that with people and bring art into their lives. So I was volunteering my time doing those things, and then the CETA program came along. My husband was out of work. I thought, well, maybe I could should get a job. And Patricia Rodriguez, who was one of the Mujeres Muralistas, told me about the CETA program and that they were hiring artists to do work for the city. And so I went down to check it out because she said it had already happened. And I thought, well, so I went down there and I heard that thousands of people had gone down there to apply, and there was nobody there when I got there. And I thought, oh, I guess it's all over. I walked into the office and they said, oh, well, there's a whole bunch of people in front of you, but here's an application, you can apply. And then they told me a couple of weeks later, they called me and said, do you want to have an interview? I said, okay. I did the interview and they said I wasn't qualified. I said, that's fine. That's okay. I'll take it, since I was volunteering at the community center, the directors there asked them if I could continue to work there as doing the work that I was doing, but also be a muralist, because they wanted me to be a muralist. Mm-hmm. So I was doing both things 40 hours a week with a child, but it was great because it was like right down the street from where I lived, and so I could take my child with me. Mm-hmm. And that's what was great about CETA too, is that, they call it a training program, but you weren't trained. It was like they really allowed you your freedom. Mm-hmm. And because it was in my neighborhood and I knew the people there and I was at Precita Valley Community Center, I felt very supported. Mm. And, but there was there was like only 5 muralists that were hired. There was like Michael Rios, Patricia Rodriguez, Graciela Carrillo, myself. I think there was just 4 of us. And we were supposed to do murals. So some of us were assigned to different schools and stuff, but the principal across the street from the community center saw what we had done before CETA and asked to do work in the school with the children. So I said, sure. So I did a workshop with the kids, but we didn't have any materials. Okay, La CETA, but no material. Mm. So fortunately, there was Ruth Asawa in the Alvarado Arts Program, and we could contact her and ask her if she had some paint around, so that we could work with the students. And so we did that, and that's kind of how I got involved. But it went over for 5 years. I was working with CETA, and I think, like what the other panelists have said, this was a seed to grow. Yeah. And I didn't plan this; it just happened. It was very organic, and it happened because of the family that I got involved with it. And so after I did the murals at the school, then there was community members that wanted to continue to practice that community process where you're all contributing to the process. And so my painting class at night turned into a mural painting class, and it became Precita Eyes. So it kind of like that evolved. Mm-hmm. And I didn't plan on it, it just happened. Mm-hmm. And the Arts Commission, who was administering the CETA program at the time, was very, they were okay with that. I mean, I could do reports and say, oh, this is what I did with the kids and the arts and crafts, and this is what I did with the murals, and having workshops with the community, planning murals. Mm-hmm. They were all fine with that. And like they said, my schedule was very flexible. Mm-hmm. But and you don't think about it when you're doing it, what impact you might have. Mm-hmm. But those kids that I was working with in the community center, I would have cooking classes, and they remember those cooking classes. And we were growing food out in the garden, and we do, and they remember that. Mm-hmm. And they still today, 50 years later, come to me and say how important that was to be a part of that, or being part of the mural that we were doing on the school across the street from the center. And how it transformed them in their lives, because otherwise they said they would be robbing people or getting in prison, and that if it hadn't been for those programs, that it would their lives would be ruined. But also when I was in the schools, I saw that there was a cultural genocide happening, because there wasn't any art in the lives of the children. And I thought, well, artists need to be more visible.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I think CETA means and what the tangible things are.
Yeah, I mean, it does, and maybe we'll go to Rhodessa next, but I would say that you talked about quite a few sort of intangible or adjacent kind of impacts, and one of them is making creativity visible. And when you make creativity and community creativity visible, the demand just grows. People come to it. It becomes something. I think that's really powerful. Rhodessa.
Wow. Memory. You mentioned Ruth Posada. Ruth Posada was so central to my forward push as an artist, as a theater artist. But I started out, I wanted to figure out how to teach history to children through theater. I mean, I have a family of 12 brothers and sisters. And at one point, 10 of my brothers and sisters had grandchildren and children. And on Saturday morning, it was left up to me, right, to take care of them. And I remember South Africa. And there was a picture of, with my baby on my back and a gun in my hand. Yes, I can. And my nephew was like, he was like, what does this mean, Beautiful photograph. And I started thinking, how do I engage these children with the world? Like somebody said today, how are you doing? I said, I'm okay, because of the weight of the world, right? And I thought about taking them outside, and we'd paint ourselves red, white, and blue, and the women would be topless, and little ones are running all around, and being black in America, being a group of black people, a black family, right? And the Art Institute was so wonderful that somebody saw us and said, would you bring this show to the school? And I'm saying, okay, we're doing a show? Is that what we're doing? And there was a whole nother interest with trying to impress upon the children. Remember that horror movie where the girl, her head would turn all the way around? Well, this is what the children are watching, right? And on Saturday morning, they got the picture of Africa and the mother with the gun and the baby. And then they're all talking about, I can't think of the name of the movie. And I'm thinking, how do I bridge these things, And I brought in artists. I was just looking at, that wonderful man. He's no longer with us, but he was at... Renee, yes. And Renee was he found out about me and he said, hey, you should come to a visual arts class I'm having. I'm like, okay, but he would let me bring the children. And my work was so much about, because I didn't see myself as an artist. My mother and father were migrant workers who fell in love with the idea that me and my hippie boyfriend was moving to California. And my dad and mother said, you're really going to Frisco, huh? And we said, yeah. And my mom and my dad and my brother, we all packed up and moved to California. And here I was, and the Peter Coyote, we wrote a grant, my brother and the man I was with and somebody else, and Peter Coyote, people say crazy stuff. He says, who's the Jones Company, a bunch of junkies? I'm like, what the hell? So he was all smiles, and Ruth Posada was sitting there going, give me this look like, girl, don't even trip, and but the doors were open for me.
Yeah.
And they were interested in the fact that I'd always have a child or two, and my nephew Lance, who has since died. He was a wonderful dancer, but he died of HIV complications. But he was this star when he was 9, 10 years old. And we would go to the Art Institute, and he would just create this amazing energy because he would turn and flip and jump. And his mother was bare-breasted, and they would be doing with my baby on my back and a gun in my hand, yes, we can. And all these children are stomping and saying this, and they're like, who are these people? You know, and at the same time, I'm saying, well, we're the Jones family. But people were saying, oh, the Jones Company. And that's how I got a foot in the door. You know, it was like I was invited to apply to things. The California Arts Council, bless their hearts, they, maybe it's being black in this place. We don't have any black people. Let's give this black family some money. And my brother Azel came from New York, and he wrote a play entitled Port Royal Sound. My brother's a Buddhist. He since died too. But my brother was interested in, what do you do with freedom when you get it? And we had children that were largely the cast, and Peter, Ruth, Leah Forbes, who worked with Ruth, they would all come and watch my rehearsals with these children. And they would tell me I was being so brilliant. I was just like trying to answer all the questions that the kids had. And then lo and behold, I was teaching at a school in the Mission, a grade school. And I thought of myself as a theater artist. I wasn't a painter or anything like that, but they asked me how could I transfer the energy or the knowledge of theater to children in the grade school, in the Mission? And I knew, I said, there's all these faces, yellow, brown, red, green. And I said to the kids, I said, I want you to bring your grandparent. I want you to bring your grandmother, your grandfather to the class, and I want you to ask your grandparent, would they tell a story about being your age and what kind of art they were doing? It hit the roof. It just went sky high. And just to fast forward, the Medea Project, Theater for Incarcerated Women, has grown out of all this experimentating with various groups of people. I just left my rehearsal today to be here, but seeing how everybody, when we're talking 1970, 70, I was a CETA artist, 1978, 79. And our people were the grandparents were beautiful. We had people from Bali. We had people from Mexico. And I remember a grandmother from Mexico, she did this whole dance for the class. And she said, now you must think of me as being 9. And her children thought that, her grandchildren thought that was so funny. But she talked to us about the steps and about the costumes and about how her mother and her grandmother had helped to make all this happen. And it just inspired so many people to come. Their kids would say, Miss Jones says that you have to come and talk about being a little kid and what kind of art you were doing. And the grandparents, they rose to the occasion. And it's all, and I don't know if it answers your question, Deborah, but it's just, all of this brings me to this closure of I am sitting here at this table today, and I suppose I'm legendary, it's like, but it all happened because of CETA. CETA was how I got paid. Not a lot of money, but it kept me, because I was a new dancer before that. I was a dancer downtown when Harvey Milk and the other politics, I was dancing naked down at Fantasies in the Flesh when these two men were killed at City Hall. And I would talk to these guys who come in to see a naked woman. I'd say, hey, what do you think's going on? They're like, huh? And I say, they're killing politicians downtown. But at the same time, it was it was CETA that gave me permission to be open about the world. And I think I'm an artist. I'm interested in the world. I do a lot of work in South Africa now. I do a lot of work in the prisons in South Africa. And I have truly been impressed, and they have been invested in the work that I've done. And when the pandemic happened, I had to stop going to Africa. But I've been working in the prisons in Africa for long and getting women's voices, getting women to write, draw, complain, cuss, rap about where they've been and what's happened to them. And if you have not seen the Medea Project, please, we open Thursday the 13th at Brava. And we no joke.
Yeah.
You know, we're no joke.
No joke.
Please, there's some flyers back there, but I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Rhodessa. Hard act to follow, Gilda.
That's my whole life, actually.
Me too, girl. I'm not way too late. I gotta go on now.
So that's the panel. Thank you. No. So I was born way after CETA, and I had to learn everything at the institution, which is kind of odd. But at the height of the Chicano movement, I am told that the neighborhood arts program, combined thereafter with CETA, really allowed artists to hone in on their craft. They didn't have to hustle, right, a side job, and then come in the afternoon and make art. It really allowed them the freedom to just be artists and support the self-liberation, self-determination that stemmed out of the civil rights, right, that our communities were fighting for, and the role that artists took thereafter. I went to UC Davis and I started printmaking in Chicano Studies, a class that Malaquias Montoya had started. And then Carlos Jackson started Taller Arte No Amanecer, who was mentored by Malaquias, continued, and then he mentored me, and that's how I ended up in community arts, or what they call community arts, but really it's been a social praxis that has been rooted in our community long thereafter. And when I came to CCA, I started working at Galeria La Raza, some images that you see there. And I met Renee. Renee Yanis, elder, past, but phenomenal impact that he had on the arts, not just in San Francisco, but Chicano art in general. Him and Ralph Maradiaga. I didn't meet Ralph because Ralph had passed then, but I would talk to the spirit of Ralph because I believed it was in this place. Can you go to the next slide? They really took some of these programs and money, and they created courses. They said our communities are not necessarily welcomed into the institutions at the time, and so we're going to bring the arts and the training to them. And they offered classes on corridos, right, song and poetry and silk screening. They exhibited art, and then I was the curator for Galeria under this legacy. And we had fun. My friend Dara, who's sitting there also, born after CETA, she works at Somarts now. And we were co-workers at Galeria La Raza at the time. And it was on us to continue this legacy, but also responsibility to the people of the mission and showcasing art by, for, and with the community. And I think that was the biggest teaching that CETA left, and artists continue to leave, especially in San Francisco. And I was, of course, inspired by Renee, and Renee would come by, and be like, "You're not doing it right." I failed. But no, he was actually really encouraging with all of the programming. And as a younger generation, a millennial, I was overwhelmed at times thinking of the legacy on all the artists I admired that I learned about. And I myself, can you go to the next slide? Actually, was a printmaker. I was making prints similar to some of these in the legacy. And then I started participating in organizing some of this Dia de los Muertos, right? Having to have this responsibility of, okay, now we organize the exhibitions. Now we're the ones that have to deal with the procession that starts in 24th and Bryant, right? Because of these legacies. But it was because of CETA that Renee and Ralph in 1972 were able to organize Dia de los Muertos as it happens and continues to happen across the mission. Can you go to the next one? And of course, some of the prints, they were really trying to promote artists, not just as, visuals of the revolution, but also thinking of the labor that artists provided for their community. Oftentimes, that work is devalued in terms of somehow people expect art to just show up. And that's not necessarily the case. It takes a lot of labor to make these prints. And so they would make these calendarios. Maybe you've seen a few prints as a way to generate funds, but also thinking of ways to make institutions being able to generate money, make them sustainable outside of grants, right? Outside of relying just on opening these spaces with government money. Can you go to the next one? And Ralph, also took it with some of his training. He was making films and teaching film to younger generations and telling the history of our people, which is important so that these stories do not get lost, right? So people like me that come in later are not as confused, hopefully, and have a pathway to show us that all of the arts are important, right, to our people, to our histories, especially in thinking of these cultural genocides that continue to happen in education and how K-12, right, we're constantly seeing the policing, right, the restriction and the censorship of BIPOC history, especially in this time. So we have these things, right, to show us that we are able to tell our histories, that we have that autonomy and agency as peoples to create a different way. And also, right, uphold the sacred stories or what we see as sacred. Can you go to the next one? And of course, this impacted up and down California when it comes to Chicano art. It wasn't just Galeria, places in Los Angeles, places in Sacramento, Galeria Posada opens, Self-Help Graphics begins to take some of these things. Totecas de Aztlán and Chicano Park begin to do some of these programs very similar. Because Chicano artists are just artists for the first time, they're able to travel up and down California and train each other, right? They're like, this worked for us, maybe it might work for you. And they're painting murals, right? They're writing songs, and they're sharing with one another. Once again, supporting that unity effort that they were really advocating for. And then a lot of money ends up drying up that especially BIPOC artists are relying on that helps them just be artists, which is a tragedy because then we have to go into the institution. And sometimes the institution isn't as friendly and we're not able to teach in the same way that maybe you were able to teach at a cultural center. And the people that you are teaching are very different than the community because oftentimes our communities are not represented in numbers in those spaces. But the wonderful thing that San Francisco does after CETA is that they create 6 organizations. One of those being Misión Gráfica, right? Or the Mission Cultural Center that then houses Misión Gráfica, which continues to have a tremendous influence and supports not just a local movement, but an international movement under Rene Castro and Joel Sances, who really revolutionized the print and create local and solidarity networks across Latin America, really. Can you go to the next slide? Some of these prints are produced by La Raza Graphics. And it's important to also note that when La Raza Graphics started, it was part of a larger network of free breakfast program, right? Community clinic. It offered many services to our communities. So art was a branch of that. It wasn't separate, which oftentimes within institutions, we think of art as a separate thing. But within our communities, they all work as a network, right? And they support one another. But because of this money running out, then we're forced to think of ways to continue this. And just want to give a big shout out personally to Juan Fuentes, who later in 1990, he runs Misión Gráfica, the rest of graphics. And it was actually Juan Fuentes who gave me my first exhibition. He put my posters up. And back then I didn't even think like I was making art. I was just making posters because I was angry, like for protest, you know? And he was the first one that put up my work in the Mission Cultural Center, actually. And I remember talking to him, and I was so shocked reading the curatorial statement because he was talking about the next generation of Chicano artists that were carrying the torch of this legacy. And for me, that really resonated as a responsibility, but also like told me that the work that I was doing was being seen, right? And it was part of a larger history. So for me, this CETA, right, has touched me in so many ways, even though I wasn't even born, right? And it continues to impact us. Like I mentioned, my good friend, she works at SOMART, and we're working in the arts. We're trying to continue the agency and support artists, whether it's Kearney Street, right, or if it's a procession, like it's CETA artists that were able to explore their craft and pass that down and mentored us, that showed us the way. And without that, San Francisco wouldn't be what it is, right? And we wouldn't even be here in the arts as people of color, or at least I think I wouldn't. I don't want to speak for other people. But it's really that history that lets me know that I belong, right? That there is a lot of work to do, and many others are to come. If there is money, so please give money to the arts. Thank you.
Yay. That's good. We can have some energy. So you three answered all of my questions kind of in this really beautiful way. So I'm gonna switch it up. But one question that I had was, why is it important to remember this work, which each of you spoke to? And then the other one, and maybe we can touch on this a little bit more, Gilda, you sort of brought home, which is why is it important for us to continue to encourage young people to practice in this way, to be publicly and community-driven and not just or not market-driven. And so I do feel like you each touched on that, but I wonder if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I think that inclusivity, or, I think all of us, really are inclusive in our actions. And I think what we want to teach young people is how they can be powerful and in whatever action they take in the arts or anything that they do, that they include their community, they can include each other, they include their families, and bring light to the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Gilda, do you want to add?
I always tell people that theater saved my life. It gave me a voice, it gave me a place to stand. And then with CETA, it wasn't a lot of money, but as Nancy, you guys were saying earlier, it was something. And it gave it gave a sense of value. I think it was Martha Graham, the great choreographer, who said that people from California believe anything is possible. And it grows out of these kind of seedlings that we have planted here, that have been planted for us here. So, I would just add that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I went to art school, as the bio said. I came here before all these beautiful buildings had risen. But I remember, it was in BCS, don't worry. Someone came and gave us a talk on how to be a successful artist. And they gave us advice on the market. and what to paint if you want to sell your art. And I was so mad because I was, biking from here to Galeria, and over there is totally different world. I was working at the Mission Cultural Center doing their MAS program with the youth, their summer program. And I was like, this is totally disconnected. Like, why would I even think of exploiting my community for a profit? And one thing I think that really came about during CETA was accountability to the communities which you are working with. And there is a documentary on CETA on YouTube, you can find it. And one of the artists, Muralists, says that they had to show their sketches to the community for the first time. That was like really revolutionary, and everybody gave them advice on what to change. But that also created respect between the artists and communities, right, that they were working with. And that's how I was trained. And that's something that doesn't necessarily get taught to you in art schools. When you're in your studio, you're just making, you're exploring, right? And then you're thinking, how do I sell this? And then you go back and the people that buy it are not necessarily your community. So I always kept in mind, will my family understand my art, right? Will like my aunt understand it? People that are not in higher education. And I think that is something that young people can continue to learn, right, from artists and now elders that continue to be with us, that participated in CETA. And I also just want to give a shout out to Amalia Mesa Baines, MacArthur genius, who used her MacArthur money and gave it to Galeria so Galeria could start a program where they mentored Indigenous and Chicano artists on how to write grants. Right? And how to make their art sustainable. And I think, right, if we're not necessarily, if we're talking about not the market, if we're talking about a different form of success for younger people in this economy, we really need to create these workshops, right? These spaces that continue to encourage younger artists and generations and tell them that the arts are a feasible field for them and they won't go broke, right? And drown in student loans, like all of us are who went to school. But I think those things are needed very much. And California is definitely, right, and the Bay is definitely a place that has the history that can continue to teach us.
That's right. That's right. You bringing Amalia Mesa Baines into the conversation is perfect because as each of you was talking, I was thinking about some of the things that we learned from the Guaranteed Income Pilot at YBCA. And one of them was if you invest in an artist, something we already knew, but now we have the data. If you invest in an artist, she will invest tenfold in her community. It's the best investment in the world. Each of you are examples of that. Organizations, global theater projects, it's extraordinary to think about the return. And the other thing that I think about often is that sometimes just a little bit of stability, like guaranteed basic income. These are artists that were living in San Francisco. It was $1,000 a month. We all know that's not a lot. But they would speak to, it allowed me to fix my car, which then allowed this. It allowed me to, get some health care that I couldn't otherwise get. And maybe most importantly, in some ways, it allowed them to dream bigger. And I think all the time about how the artists in this country aren't set up to dream as big as they can because they don't have that sort of support. You all are clear breakthroughs. You do it anyway. But I feel like it would be interesting to hear from you, and maybe this is a good way to wind us down. It would be interesting just to hear from each of you what you think now. What's the next step in this work?
Well, I think we just have to give more freedom in our education, that it's not so controlled, that we're creating curriculum around what they have passion for. Yeah. And that way they will learn what they have, where they can find their freedom.
That's right. Other thoughts?
That's very interesting. the whole idea that when you said freedom, I thought about movement, working with young people, and especially children, getting them to stand on their hands, and not being afraid to stand on your hands. And then I have a great-grandson who's 4. And he thinks he's a photographer. He thinks he's Kendrick Lamar, all these things. And he says, Gigi, I'm going to take pictures, okay? And so I've gotten him a camera. And with his friends, he's learning how to think. I don't know what I'm going to do with these pictures, but already there's more freedom, which is what...
His passion.
Yeah, it's what we kind of lost.
Let them dream their passion.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what we kind of lost when,
We're not treating them like human beings
Right.
by controlling them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'll just offer. For me, it's been intergenerational connections. Highlighting that. I remember when I started, I was like, where's everyone? Why didn't they teach me this? It was so cool back then. Where's all the revolution? Everyone just wants money. But I also understand that, right, people went into institutions and it became a lot different. And some organizations closed down. Some people passed and those histories weren't written or documented. And there's a big loss. So for me, it's really maintaining those connections to elders, even if it means knocking on their doors, right? Emailing them or calling them because they don't like the phone more than the Instagram or the Facebook. So, reaching out constantly, bringing them into the loop when I have new projects, and as well as younger people, right? Making that connection, serving as a bridge, so to say, has been really important for me.
Yeah, that's a really, really beautiful way to bring us home. I feel like deep love for the city of San Francisco. I live here. This is my home. And I feel like there's no better way to engage with the history of our city than this. These moments are so tangible and so live. And so, again, thank you to these amazing people for joining me on a Saturday afternoon. And thank you all for sticking it through.